The man in seat 1A looked out the window as the plane taxied onto the runway. Impeccably dressed in a navy-tailored suit, white gold cufflinks, and braided leather shoes, Donovan Chase didn't need to speak to be noticed. But today, he intended to stay invisible. This was supposed to be a quiet flight. First-class ticket. 6 hours of peace. No press. No schedule. No spotlight. Just time. Time to grieve. Time to think. Because the man who ran one of the largest tech corporations in America, who'd graced the cover of Forbes and built scholarship programs across the country, had just buried his mother. And today, he just wanted a warm meal. And silence. But silence wasn't what he got. Because 30 minutes after takeoff, when the flight attendant came down the aisle with the meal cart, something happened that Donovan hadn't experienced in years. Not in this way. She looked at him, looked at the cart, then leaned toward the white woman in seat 1B. Would you like the salmon or filet mignon? Then she looked at Donovan. Expression changed. Sir, we've run out of meals. Coach is still serving snacks. No explanation. No apology. Just dismissal. He blinked once. Calm. Civil. That's strange, he said. I pre-ordered filet when I booked. She tilted her head, voice flat. Maybe next time you should fly earlier. The woman in 1B glanced at him, unsure whether to step in. Donovan smiled politely, the same smile black professionals learn in boardrooms and airports, the one that says I see you, but I will not bend for you. He didn't argue. He didn't complain. He just pulled out his phone. What the flight crew didn't know. This wasn't just any man. This was Donovan Chase, CEO of Kintech Global, a multi-billion-dollar tech firm with active contracts in aviation logistics and airline customer analytics. He wasn't just a first-class passenger. He was their system's silent architect. When the plane landed 6 hours later, Donovan didn't yell. He didn't rant. He simply stood, adjusted his blazer, and made one phone call while walking through the jet bridge. Get me HR at Stellar Air's executive office. And legal. By noon the next day, headlines read, Entire first-class crew terminated after Black CEO exposes discrimination. Flight staff denied meal to tech billionaire, unaware of who he was. Airline faces PR nightmare. Donovan didn't release a statement. Instead, he posted one quote on his verified account. Some of us no longer need to raise our voice. We just press send. The morning after the flight, Donovan Chase stood in front of a mirror. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. Years of corporate battles. Code switching. Smiling when insulted. Thanking when dismissed. Proving, over and over, that he deserved the room he built. But yesterday? Yesterday reminded him, no level of success protects you from being underestimated. Not when your skin speaks louder than your resume. His phone buzzed. Call from Malik, head of PR. He answered. Malik's voice was nervous. Don, this is exploding. CNN, MSNBC, even international outlets are on it. You sure you don't want to make a statement? Donovan poured coffee into a mug. I already did. Yeah, but the Post? Some of us just press send? That line's poetic, but people want details. Names. Faces. Donovan paused. I'm not interested in punishment. I'm interested in patterns. By 10 a.m., Stellar Air's board had called an emergency meeting. They didn't know yet that the man trending online wasn't just a public figure. He was their vendor. His company had developed the predictive analytics system used to optimize Stellar Air's staffing, loyalty program, and in-flight service protocols. And he'd just revoked access. In a high-rise office overlooking Manhattan, the CEO of Stellar Air, Martin Ellison, slammed a report down. This can't be happening. His legal counsel looked pale. It's worse. Kintech Global just froze our contract. That system runs everything from upgrades to seat prioritization. Martin rubbed his temples. Why didn't anyone tell me we had a black billionaire on that flight? The room went silent. Then someone mumbled. Because no one thought to look. Meanwhile, Donovan was sitting on a park bench in Harlem. Not in a suit. Just jeans, sneakers, and a Kintech hoodie. Across from him sat a young programmer named Andre, a mentee from Kintech's internship program. You really gonna let them fire the whole crew? Donovan took a sip of his coffee. I didn't fire them. The system did. I just pulled back the protection they didn't know they had. Andre shook his head. You could sue, go on TV, drag them. Donovan looked him dead in the eye. You think I built all this just to go viral? He leaned forward. I'm not here to punish airlines. I'm here to rebuild them. Donovan didn't need a trending topic. He needed data. And Kintech Global had plenty of it. Over a decade's worth of anonymized feedback, passenger complaint logs, flight crew surveys, and in-flight service records from dozens of airlines, including Stellar Air. He entered his private data dashboard, the one no one had access to but him. One search, 3 filters, and then the pattern emerged. Black passengers were 3.4x more likely to receive no meal available responses on first-class tickets. Hispanic passengers were 2.1x more likely to be passed over during upgrade availability. Passengers with ethnic-sounding names had lower success rates in loyalty reward redemption, despite identical profiles. Worse, crew reports corroborated the bias. Some even joked in internal messages. "Oh, seat 2A about to pull the race card. Someone hand him pretzels. Why are they always so sensitive? Just a meal." It wasn't a mistake. It was a culture. Donovan sat back in his chair, heart heavy. He hadn't just been humiliated. He had been statistically predictable, and he knew what that meant. If it happened to me, in a suit worth 5 figures, what's happening to people with no voice at all? He called Malik again. Push the press off another 48 hours. What? They're begging for your side. They'll get it, but not as a headline. He hung up and typed a message to his head of research and ethics. "I want a full report. 10 years of systemic bias across all Kintech airline partners. Pull everything. We're going public." Meanwhile, at Stellar Air headquarters, chaos brewed. Executives were panicking, not about the firing, but the fallout. If he drops data, we lose the trust of every POC customer we've ever had. We could be facing class action lawsuits. Do we offer him a deal? Martin Ellison, their CEO, stood at the window, staring out. You don't offer silence to a man who's building a microphone. That night, Donovan returned to his mother's apartment, the same tiny Brooklyn walk-up he'd bought her before her passing. Her photos still lined the mantel. He sat on the old couch, opened his laptop, and titled a new press release draft. "Bias at 30,000 feet, when comfort costs us our humanity." And beneath it, the first line read, "This is not about a steak dinner. This is about the thousands of people who are quietly taught they don't belong, even when they've paid the same price." The next morning, Donovan entered the Kintech boardroom wearing black, not for mourning, but for focus. Behind him trailed a hand-picked team, a civil rights attorney from D.C., a DI data analyst from Stanford, a former airline crew trainer turned whistleblower, and his newest advisor, Elena Cruz, a no-nonsense Latina executive with scars from her own fight against discrimination in corporate travel. On the screen, a bold title, Project Equal Altitude, the first ever independent audit of in-flight bias. Donovan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. We're not here to cancel airlines. We're here to confront a reality they've quietly normalized. And we're going to do it with precision, proof, and purpose. Elena nodded. And when the pushback comes, and it will, we lead with data, not rage. The plan: scrub 15 years of anonymized flight data. Interview hundreds of flight staff under NDA protection. Cross-analyze meal denials, seating patterns, upgrade paths, and complaint resolution by race, gender, and class. Donovan had one rule: no assumptions, no emotion, just truth. By week 2, the numbers were devastating. Airline after airline, route after route. Minority passengers were being passed over, skipped, dismissed, systemically. And the worst part? Most didn't file complaints. They just expected it. Word began to spread quietly through corporate circles. Emails leaked. Executives panicked. And by week 3, Project Equal Altitude had been labeled a PR atomic bomb. One airline issued a preemptive press release, calling it data manipulation. Another offered Donovan $10 million to pause the project and work internally. He refused. But it wasn't just CEOs getting nervous. Online hate campaigns began. Trolls posted his personal address. Pundits called him overly sensitive, ungrateful, and playing the race card. One podcast host sneered, "If he's so rich, why does he care about airplane food?" Donovan saw it all and said nothing until he walked into a public town hall hosted by Kintech's community program and sat in the back. A young woman stood up with a shaking voice. "I work 2 jobs. My son saved up to take me on a surprise flight for my birthday. First class. My first time. They gave the guy next to me a meal. They told me mine was not available." She looked down. "I didn't say anything, because I thought, Maybe I didn't look like I belonged. Donovan stood slowly. And for the first time in the campaign, his voice cracked. You belonged. You always have. And we're going to make damn sure they never forget it again. Donovan hadn't planned to fly that week. But the invitation came from the top. A closed-door roundtable with major airline CEOs, hosted by the U.S. Department of Transportation. He couldn't say no. Not when Project Equal Altitude had become the most anticipated audit since the FAA's post-9/11 reforms. At the gate, he wore no suit, just a black hoodie and jeans. Let the industry see him as they really did, not dressed for their approval, but walking in his own authority. As he approached Gate B12, his assistant looked up from her tablet. Sir, they booked you on Stellar Air. Donovan paused, smiled thinly. Good. Flight 237. The same route. Same airline. Same cabin. Seat 1A. He stepped onto the plane and instantly recognized the uniform cut, the color palette, the sterile cheerfulness of the front crew. But something else had changed. Their posture. The lead flight attendant, a young white man with a silver nameplate, did a double take as Donovan stepped into first class. Welcome aboard, Mr. Chase. Donovan raised an eyebrow. You know who I am? The man nodded. We all do, sir. He extended a hand. Donovan shook it, firm, measured. Well then, Donovan said, settling into 1A. Let's see if this flight lands with more than the wheels. The cabin was silent. Everyone recognized him now. Some passengers whispered. One woman gave him a look that was half awe, half apology for the world. But Donovan stayed still. No threats. No requests. Just presence. 30 minutes into the air, the meal cart approached. This time, no hesitation. Mr. Chase, your filet is medium rare, as you ordered, paired with a 2018 Cabernet. He accepted it without a word, until the flight attendant leaned in and said quietly, I'm new here. I joined after you fired the last crew. Is that so? Donovan replied. They made this a rule now. See every seat. Know every name. Donovan looked at him for a moment, then smiled. That's a start. As the flight descended, his assistant handed him the final draft of the audit, 146 pages of data, testimony, and reform recommendations. Donovan tucked it into his leather satchel. Outside the window, Washington, D.C. grew larger. But the movement? It had already taken off. The boardroom at the Department of Transportation was polished to a mirror shine. Glass walls, state seals, nameplates lined like battalions. But Donovan Chase didn't care for titles. He cared for accountability. 12 men and women sat at the U-shaped table, CEOs, legal advisors, compliance officers, representing the 7 largest airlines in North America. At the head sat Deputy Secretary Lynn Rivera, a sharp-eyed Latina known for dismantling broken systems without flinching. She motioned to the lone folder Donovan placed in front of him. Mr. Chase, we've read the executive summary, but we're here for the whole story. He opened the folder, revealing 146 pages stamped. Project Equal Altitude, Final Audit Report. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. This is not a press stunt. Not a vendetta. Not about one bad flight or one bad crew. This is your mirror. He flipped the first page. 1 in 3 black first-class passengers reported being skipped during meal or beverage service. 40% of racially profiled passengers never filed complaints. 62% of airline crew surveyed admitted they received no formal DI training. 5 out of 7 airlines failed to act on repeated bias complaints, internally buried them. Gasps. Shuffling. One CEO leaned back, arms crossed. You can't expect us to be responsible for every individual interaction. Donovan cut in, calm but clear. I don't. I expect you to stop designing systems that hide the harm. He slid a second packet across the table. This is a reform blueprint. Required equity audits every 6 months. Anonymous crew accountability system. Mandated DI training tied to federal contract eligibility. Passenger protection rights printed on every boarding pass. He locked eyes with them. You want to serve the public? Start by seeing all of it. Deputy Secretary Rivera folded her hands. And if they don't comply? Donovan leaned back. Then we release the full audit. All 146 pages. Names redacted, patterns intact. And let the public decide who deserves their trust and their dollars. Silence. One by one, eyes dropped. Because they knew. They couldn't unsee the numbers. After the meeting, a reporter caught up to Donovan on the Capitol steps. "Mr. Chase, what do you want from this?" He looked into the camera. "I don't want airlines punished. I want black kids to grow up knowing first class doesn't mean second-class dignity." The report dropped at midnight. Within hours, the internet split in two. Hashtag equal altitude trended worldwide. Civil rights groups hailed Donovan as the new blueprint for boardroom justice. Airline passengers flooded TikTok and X with their own horror stories. But not everyone applauded. On a morning cable show, a panelist sneered. "This is just a lead outrage. He got his filet mignon a day late, and now he wants to burn the system down." Another said, "You can't fix human bias with spreadsheets." Donovan watched in silence from Kinteca's headquarters, then turned to Elena Cruz, who sipped her coffee like a war general preparing for a second battle. "The numbers don't move hearts," she said. "Stories do." Donovan nodded slowly. "Then it's time we tell ours." The next day, Kintec launched the Cabin Files, a live archive of anonymized, verified passenger experiences. Within 48 hours, over 20,000 stories poured in. A Muslim woman who was removed after asking for a halal meal. A black child denied headphones while white kids in the same row got toys. A Latino veteran mistaken for a baggage handler while waiting to board. Each story had a date, a flight, a voice. And every story ended the same. "I didn't say anything because I didn't think it would matter." Then, something unexpected happened. Stellar Air's chief experience officer, Gregory Lask, posted a handwritten letter to the Kintec public inbox. "Dear Mr. Chase, I was on the original task force that designed Stellar Air's first-class protocol. I now realize how blind we were. I'd like to resign from my post and work with your team. No contract, no salary, just the truth. Because silence is no longer an option I can live with. Respectfully, Greg Lask." The message went viral. Not because it was perfect, but because it was rare. A man in power, choosing discomfort over denial. Donovan reached out personally. They met in a quiet Brooklyn cafe. Greg, disheveled, wore the weight of 1,000 unacknowledged decisions. "I can't undo the years." Donovan replied. "Then help us build the next ones right." As protests brewed outside airline HQs in 3 major cities, Donovan stood in front of a crowd at Howard University. The air was electric. "We don't want your pity flights. We don't want seat upgrades in exchange for silence. We want a world where our money buys more than a view. It buys respect." The crowd roared. And in that moment, he wasn't a CEO. He was a compass. The email came at 2:17 a.m. Encrypted. No signature. Just a subject line. "You're being played. Check page 43. Donovan sat upright in bed. He opened the attachment. An internal memo from one of Kinteca's partner companies. A name stood out in bold. Skycore Systems. They weren't just a competitor. They were Kinteca's former client, once rejected by Donovan after they refused to revise a facial recognition algorithm that disproportionately flagged black and brown passengers as suspicious. Now, they were back, and playing dirty. The memo was clear. Delay the rollout of equal altitude across our airline clients. Leak doubts about Chase's data integrity. Use media surrogates to push the angry billionaire narrative. Goal: discredit the movement. Preserve our market position. At the bottom, a chilling line. Every system has a failsafe. We are theirs. Donovan paced his office at dawn, Elena on speaker. "They're trying to kill this. Quietly. Technically. Legally. Let them try," she growled. "We don't need their systems. We'll build our own." But it wasn't just sabotage. That week, Kinteca's servers faced multiple cyber attacks. 2 speaking engagements were canceled without explanation. An anonymous caller left a message on Donovan's personal line. "Drop the campaign. Before it drops you." He didn't flinch. Instead, he assembled a war room. Legal, cybersecurity, ethics, PR. And in the center, a whiteboard with 3 words. "Let truth lead." Greg Lask, now fully embedded on the team, stepped forward. "I used to sit at those Skycore meetings. I know how they think. They won't stop at bad press. They'll question the data, the method, the messenger." Donovan looked around the room. "Then we put the data in the people's hands. Raw, unfiltered, public domain. They want to fight in backrooms. We fight in daylight." That night, Kintec launched equalaltitude.org/open, making every chart, code snippet, and methodology available to anyone. Coders, activists, journalists, Students. Transparency became the sword. And the shield. Skycorp fired back with a deepfake video of Donovan supposedly berating a flight attendant. It spread fast, until the original flight attendant posted a selfie video. "This is fake. Mr. Chase treated me with dignity. Don't fall for digital lies." That 30-second clip got 12 million views in 8 hours. The internet turned, and Skycorp started to bleed credibility. At a staff huddle days later, Elena smirked. "They thought you were building a campaign. They didn't realize you were building a movement." A white envelope slid across Donovan's desk. No branding, just a seal. The presidential crest. He opened it slowly. Asterisk, Mr. Chase. Your work has redefined equity in American infrastructure. The president would be honored if you joined the National Transportation Equity Council as senior advisor. Asterisk. He read it twice, then placed the letter down quietly. Outside the office window, New York moved like always, fast, loud, unbothered. But Donovan? He felt still. Not proud, not excited, conflicted. Because the higher you climb, the more you leave behind. That night, at a private dinner with Kintech execs, Malik raised a toast. From aisle seat to head table. "You earned this, D." Everyone clinked glasses, except Donovan. Before he could respond, a woman entered the restaurant. He froze. So did time. She wore a navy blazer and silver studs. Walked with calm authority. Carried no entourage. But she carried history. Camille Bryant. Investigative journalist. Harvard law dropout. His ex. And the only person who ever told him. Changing the world doesn't mean you get to run from your own. Donovan stood. "Camille, I didn't know you were in town." She slid into the empty chair beside him. "I wasn't. Until I saw your face on every screen and remembered. You still never told them about your father." The table went silent. He cleared his throat. "Camille, now's not." "Don't worry," she said, voice low but sharp. "I'm not here to destroy you. I'm here to remind you. You can't fix the system if you're still afraid of your own cracks." Back at his apartment, Donovan stared at a photo on the bookshelf. A boy in church clothes, next to a man in handcuffs. His father, falsely accused, sentenced to 15 years for interfering with an officer during a traffic stop. Released after 7. Silenced ever since. Donovan had buried that story deep, afraid that telling it would make him look angry, not credible. But Camille's voice echoed in his mind. Your silence protects their comfort more than your truth ever protected your future. The next day, he walked into a CNN studio. Interview. Prime time. He sat under the lights. Mic clipped. Questions prepped. But when the anchor asked, "What made you launch Equal Altitude?" Donovan dropped the script and told the story. All of it. His father. The arrest. The trial. The silence. The meal he never got, and the justice his father never did. The segment aired that night and broke every record. The call came just after midnight. Unknown number. No caller ID. But Donovan knew the voice before it even said his name. "Boy, you always did know how to make a mess just by telling the truth." He didn't speak right away. Didn't need to. "Hey, Pop." Silence. Then a long exhale. "I watched your interview. Thought you might have forgot about me." Donovan swallowed hard. "I didn't forget. I buried it. Because I didn't think the world would listen to me and accept that part." His father chuckled, soft, worn, wise. "Then maybe the world don't deserve the whole you. But your son does." Donovan's throat tightened. "I don't have a son. Not yet. But one day you will. And you'll want to teach him what a man looks like when he stands his full height." The next morning, Donovan sat in his Brooklyn apartment. No laptop. No cameras. Just a journal. On the page, he wrote 5 words. He never stopped being my father. He knew now. Equal Altitude wasn't just about boarding passes or meal carts. It was about how dignity travels through generations. That week, Kintech's Equal Altitude platform hit 50 million unique visitors. The FAA requested a formal collaboration. 3 major airlines signed voluntary reform pledges, including Stellar Air. But none of that hit Donovan as hard as the letter he received days later. From a high school teacher in Detroit. Asterisk, my students watched your speech. They don't remember what you wore or even the airline's name. But they remember this. Asterisk, even a seat in first class won't protect you if they refuse to see your worth. Thank you for giving them a mirror and a ladder. Asterisk. Later that night, Donovan boarded a red-eye to LA. Not as a CEO, as a keynote speaker at the Global Equity Summit. The flight attendant greeted him with a familiar phrase. "Mr. Chase, we've been expecting you. Anything we can do to make your flight more comfortable?" He looked her in the eye. "See me. That's all." As the plane lifted into the sky, Donovan looked out the window. Beneath him were systems built to keep people in place. Above him, endless altitude. And this time, he wasn't rising alone. The summit in LA was electric, packed with educators, activists, policymakers, even CEOs from industries outside of aviation. Donovan's keynote was supposed to close the event, but before he could take the stage, his assistant whispered in his ear, "Board just called an emergency vote. 60 minutes. Full investor panel. It's serious." He paused. "Serious how?" "They're talking divestment, unless you pull back from equal altitude." 40 minutes later, Donovan sat in a glass-walled conference room overlooking Sunset Boulevard. 12 investors appeared on screen, one by one. Some faces he knew, some he'd once considered allies. The chair, a sharp British banker, spoke first. "Donovan, we appreciate the work you've done, truly. But activism is beginning to impact profitability. Your name has become political, and that's not what Kintec was built for." Donovan raised an eyebrow. "You're saying justice is off-brand?" Another investor chimed in. "We're saying clients are nervous. Your visibility is bleeding into contracts. The reform push is noble, but it's becoming a liability." He leaned forward. Calm, measured, sharp. "So let me understand. You backed me when we disrupted flight logistics, when we overhauled government travel systems. But now that we're disrupting discrimination, I'm too loud." Silence. The chair said quietly, "We're offering you an exit package. You walk away from equal altitude. We appoint a new CEO. Kintec survives, and so does your legacy." Donovan looked down at the table, then stood. "I didn't build Kintec to survive. I built it to lead. If that makes me inconvenient, then let me make it official." He reached for a pen and signed a document he'd drafted months ago, just in case. A full leadership transition. He would resign as CEO, but retain his 42% ownership and redirect his power toward launching a new initiative. Back in New York, Elena read the headline and smiled. "Donovan Chase steps down, but doubles down." The subheading? "Former CEO launches nonprofit wing to implement equal altitude reforms globally, beginning with rail, rideshare, and public transport systems." That night, Camille called. "You finally stepped into the exit row." Donovan laughed softly. "Yeah," and pulled the handle. She paused. "So where to next, Mr. Chase?" He looked out at the skyline. "Everywhere they said we couldn't sit." The announcement rippled through the media like lightning through clear skies. Chase steps down. Market wobbles. Movement rises. But with momentum came something else. Threats. Some subtle, some not. A right-wing senator from Georgia, Marshall Kincaid, took to national television. "Donovan Chase is weaponizing data to push a race-based agenda. He doesn't want equality. He wants control." That night, Chase's new nonprofit, Altitude for All, had its website attacked. 3 staffers received anonymous emails. One had their car tires slashed outside their apartment. The message was clear. "Back off, or we'll bury you in paperwork, in fear, in silence." Donovan wasn't new to pressure. But this wasn't about contracts or systems. This was about power. And who gets to wield it? Elena stormed into his office. "We've traced the funding. Kincaid's team is backing a shadow org lobbying against federal transport reforms. They want your project DOA. Then we drag it into daylight. And if they bury you in congressional red tape." Donovan stared at the map of expansion routes on his wall. "Then we show up in every city they don't expect us in. Rural, underserved, ignored. We don't wait for permission. We build without it." So they did. Within 6 weeks, Altitude for All launched its pilot program in Jackson, Mississippi; Oakland, California; Flint, Michigan; Amarillo, Texas. They didn't start with planes. They started with buses, trains, subways, drivers who'd been dismissed, ignored, and forgotten. In Flint, a young black woman named Trina stood beside a dusty bus stop and wept after seeing the new rider code printed on a poster. "No matter where you sit, you deserve to be seen." She sent Donovan a photo with 3 words. "I finally exhaled." Meanwhile, Kincaid escalated. He filed a congressional motion for a public audit of nonprofit overreach, targeting Donovan's funding sources, staff payroll, and partnerships. The message? We'll find something. And if we don't, we'll invent it. Camille called that night. He's coming for blood. Donovan nodded. Then he should pack a parachute. The chamber was packed. Cameras lined the marble walls. Journalists jostled for angles. And at the center of it all sat Donovan Chase, calm as ever in a charcoal suit, no tie. Not because he was unprepared, but because he wasn't playing by their script. Senator Marshall Kincaid entered last, flanked by aides, his trademark scowl sharper than ever. This hearing, he began, is not about race. It's about recklessness. Mr. Chase's nonprofit has received over $40 million in funding from unvetted sources, implemented unauthorized transportation reforms, and may be influencing public policy outside of democratic process. Donovan didn't blink. He waited. Then, at the chairwoman's nod, stood and adjusted the mic. Madam Chair, Senators, I appreciate the concern over influence. But let me be clear. We didn't ask for influence. The public gave it to us after they saw what decades of silence got them. He held up a chart. Not flashy, not doctored, just numbers. In the past 90 days, our pilot transit reforms reduced complaints of racial bias by 72% in 4 cities. 911 calls from buses and subways dropped by 43%. And for the first time in 3 years, transit ridership among low-income residents is rising, without increasing fare cost. He looked at Kincaid. That's not chaos. That's competence. Kincaid leaned in. Mr. Chase, are you currently receiving foreign funding? No. Are you coordinating with any political campaigns? None. Do you consider yourself above government oversight? Donovan smiled. No, Senator. But I do consider myself beyond your fear. The room tensed. He stepped back from the podium, voice firm but even. You can't audit my truth. You can't subpoena a movement. And you can't stop change by throwing shadows at light. Camille watched from the back of the room, hand over her mouth. And in that moment, she realized. He wasn't just defending a project. He was defending every person who had ever been told to sit down and be grateful. Later that day, the hearing aired nationwide. And something unexpected happened. Bus drivers in St. Louis wore shirts that said, I see you. Flight attendants in Chicago posted solidarity videos. A group of teenage coders launched Altitude Watch, an app to report bias in public transit. The movement had outgrown the man. And Kincaid? He looked up from his notes to find half the room wasn't looking at him anymore. They were looking at hope. The call came just after 3 a.m. Donovan was alone in his D.C. hotel suite, reviewing post-hearing interviews when the screen lit up. Unknown caller. But the voice? Immediate. Familiar. Fragile. It's me, son. It's your father. You need to come home. The next flight out of D.C. was at dawn. He didn't bring a team. No press. No statements. Just a black carry-on and the weight of everything he'd built. Detroit, where the ceilings were low, where the sidewalks cracked, where the system first failed his family, and where his father's health was now failing too. He walked into the hospital, and for the first time in years, saw the man who taught him to raise his voice by surviving without one. The machines beeped. The oxygen hissed. But his father still had his fire. I saw you on the news. That hearing, you said things I never could. Donovan pulled a chair close. You shouldn't have had to stay silent. His father smiled weakly. But you didn't. That's the thing, son. You broke the cycle. You made the world say our name. For the next 2 days, Donovan stayed by his bedside. No interviews. No meetings. No boardrooms. Just stories. Laughter. And silence that didn't need filling. On the flight back to New York, Donovan sat in economy. By choice. A young black mother sat beside him with a baby on her lap. She kept apologizing every time the child fussed. Donovan gently smiled. He doesn't need to be quiet. He needs to be heard. She blinked, then whispered, Wait, are you? He just nodded. She leaned in. Thank you for making room for us in every seat. As the plane touched down, Donovan didn't feel powerful. He felt centered, because true change didn't come from boardroom applause. It came from quiet moments where dignity whispered, You belong. Waiting at the gate was Elena. She handed him a folder marked Global Initiative. Inside, invitations from cities around the world, London, Johannesburg, Tokyo, Toronto, all wanting to bring equal altitude to their transit systems. Donovan looked up. You sure we're ready? She grinned. They weren't ready for you. But they're watching now. The ballroom was silent. Not from absence, from awe. Representatives from 42 countries stood shoulder to shoulder, gathered beneath the vaulted glass ceiling of the UN Global Transit Forum in Geneva. And at the podium, Donovan Chase, no longer just a CEO, no longer just a symbol, but a man who turned turbulence into testimony and built runways where there had only been roadblocks. He took a breath, looked out at the crowd. This didn't start as a global mission. It started with a meal I didn't receive, with a father who sat in silence so I could stand in full voice, with a world that said you can fly, but only if you didn't ask for legroom. Polite chuckles, then stillness again. Today, we're launching Altitude Unlimited, a global partnership dedicated to eliminating bias in every layer of public transportation, from plane seats to bus stops, from metro systems to rideshare algorithms, from what's seen to what's been silently endured for decades. He paused, then added quietly, because accessibility isn't just about getting there. It's about knowing you were meant to arrive. Over the next 3 months, Altitude Unlimited broke barriers. Cape Town, new protocols for multilingual signage and rider dignity. Helsinki, piloting AI that flags discriminatory behavior, not passengers. Rio de Janeiro, elevating favela transit routes long neglected. Chicago, public school programs now taught equity in transit alongside history. But Donovan's proudest moment? A dedication ceremony at a small Detroit subway platform, where a mural now stood. A man in handcuffs, a boy with a book, and behind them, wings, vast and golden, rising over tracks. The plaque read, "For every seat denied, we built a sky that couldn't be." Camille stood beside him. "You did it." He shook his head. "We did. And now we make sure the ones coming after never have to do it again." On his last flight of the year, seat 3A, window, Donovan didn't touch his laptop. He watched a little black girl across the aisle get handed a pair of toy wings by a smiling flight attendant. "For our co-pilot in row 4, the woman beamed. The girl turned, pointed to Donovan, and whispered to her mom, "Is that the man who changed flying?" Her mom smiled. "No, baby. That's the man who reminded them we never needed to beg for wings."